The role of the prophet is twofold: to tell forth the truth, pro and femi, to speak, and to tell before it happens the consequences of not listening, or whatever it might be, because they participate quite often, these prophets, in the charism of knowledge, that is, in the knowledge of God. They are, in a major way, somehow inserted in the mystery of the power and wisdom that rules the cosmos. People who are involved in clairvoyance, people who are involved in apparent knowledge, if they are not obtaining it from the correct source, are obtaining it from another source, and we know what that might be. The demons are superior to humans with regard to their knowledge, because they see what is going on around the world and have a capacity to calculate the consequences. They know far more about what is going on, and they know also about the influence they can have on things that might go on, knowing the weaknesses of certain characters, and therefore they can calculate. And people who are in league with the demons have a participation, therefore, in his knowledge, and we call it fortune-telling. The gift of the Spirit, the gift of knowledge, the gift of wisdom, the gift of discernment, is of a different order. The Lord is able to give gratuitously these gifts. Gratia gratis data, a grace freely given for the good of the body. One does see souls here and there who have the gift of discernment, who have the gift of knowledge, who are given supernaturally some kind of participation in the divine, even on the level of what they are given to understand, often in prayer. These then are special gifts, charismata, and before the incarnation took place, these prophets were a direct link with God and much sought after. In the early church, the confessors, those who were tortured but survived, were also greatly respected, because they were able to claim the promise given by the Lord that the Spirit would give them the word to utter when they were under duress. And we see that these quasi-martyrs were often inspired, as were the martyrs themselves. One has but to think of the way that St. Joan of Arc, at the ripe old age of 19, without being able even to write, was able to give perfectly theological answers when threatened with torture, even by those who knew far more than she did theologically. With regard to the role of the prophet in proclaiming fearlessly, against all the odds and consequences, like Jeremiah, the truth of the king, that is something entrusted to every Christian in virtue of his baptism and confirmation, participation in the role of Christ as priest, prophet, and king, but in a formal and clear way to those who are acting in his name, informing the flock. The English poet John Milton has in one of his poems, "The hungry sheep look up and are not fed." The people need to know the truth, and one can but ask oneself, is 5 minutes on a Saturday evening or a Sunday sufficient for them to know the truth, given the large amount of time, compared with that, 5 minutes, dedicated fearlessly to ingesting all that the radio waves and television waves might want to fill our souls with. Wherever one goes, one is obliged to listen to these messages coming across the air, subtly but erosively working at our system. One cannot expose oneself day in, day out to the culture of our soap operas, so-called, because they transmit a godless culture, one which marginalizes our values and proclaims indirectly but powerfully by its insistence another norm, that of the purely human, in which God and his commands do not enter into the equation. People are influenced by role models on the television, and therefore to expose one's soul and that of others over whom one has authority fearlessly to this education on the level of the norm given is not without moral importance. We need to be careful what goes in, and also to be aware of what is in the people out there addressed on a Sunday. And therefore they need powerful messages given with that authority which we see in the gospel. They see that the Lord is something else. He speaks with authority. The words of the prophets are fulfilled in him. And, of course, because a person too familiar to the company around, is not accepted easily, he is rejected. A prophet is not without honor except in his own situation. And so it is that it is difficult sometimes for a priest or a bishop to wield the correct authority, because they might be afraid of upsetting, especially if they know a local situation. They might not want to come close to the bone or the nerve, and so it might be easier to back down and not attack certain issues. But who then bears the consequences before God as regards moral responsibility? If people are not taught, then their responsibility might not be as great as the one who is not teaching them. With regard to the law of God, it is as the Lord himself summed up in the law of charity. And St. Paul, in today's reading, has this magnificent hymn, Eulogy to Charity. It is interesting to note that the early Christian movement found the need to adopt another term, two other terms, one the verb, the other the noun, to express the concept of love wanted by the Lord. The love amongst the brethren, which was the command of the Lord himself, his dying wish, and the signal, the sign, to be held up to the world by the new people of God, was to be a reproduction upon earth of the love, the circumincession that is in the universe, in the Godhead itself. All human love is a pale reflection of the current of love that made us and guides the whole universe. God is love. God is relationship. And we are commanded to be something of the same. And therefore to go around functioning in dysfunctionality, emitting unpleasantness, bitterness, darkness, and indeed hatred, is to go around in a very un-Christian mode. And if that happens in a specifically professional realm, e.g. honouring the Lord in the work of the church, if all that happens in an uncharitable mode, then it is defeating the object of the exercise. All that pertains to God must be done in the Spirit of God. A fortiori, what happens in church itself should be a direct reflection of the life of the Trinity therein being honoured, and not a reproduction of the fumes of hell. There is nothing worse than seeing arguments and pain, aggressive correction and lack of respect coming into the house of God, where God actually gave a very simple command and not many rubrics initially, just love one another. And we can let the overgrowth confuse the issue if we're not careful. We must never forget that charity is the bottom line. And as St. John of the Cross says, in the evening of life we will be examined upon love. But that love is not emotional love, and that's why the Christians of the early church chose to use this word agape as the noun and agapein as the verb to express what was the specificity of the Christian faith. We are different in that sense from other major religions and cultures. One has but to see how Muslim children are brought up even from an early age, to see how for them a certain aggressiveness and virile force is expected of them. Christians can be taken advantage of because of this law of charity, but it is also a strong charity, a charity able to educate. To back down from that is the weakness that is not wanted. We need a strong love, and love is not soppiness or sugariness. It is a caring even unto death, for the cross was not sugary. Our redemption hurt, and we must be careful that we don't tone down our faith in a false understanding of charity that is not just something that is afraid to wound. People need to hear the truth, and charity sometimes can hurt. It is wiser to warn people, as a prophet, that the consequences of grave sin are there and eternally there, rather than be afraid and consequently be awfully nice and never say the truth, even once in the pulpit.